It was supposed to be just another Vegas show in 1976. But halfway through the set, Elvis stopped the music, whispered something into the mic, and the crowd froze. What he said next turned a love song into a confession and left 20,000 people in tears, including Priscilla. It was supposed to be just another Vegas show in 1976. But halfway through the set, Elvis stopped the music, whispered something into the mic, and the crowd froze. What he said next turned a love song into a confession and left 20,000 people in tears, including Priscilla. December 2nd, 1976, Las Vegas Hilton. The showroom shimmered beneath gold chandeliers, cigarette haze curling like smoke from a dream. 20,000 fans squeezed shoulder to shoulder, the kind of crowd that could lift a man higher than fame or crush him beneath its roar. Backstage, Elvis adjusted the jeweled phoenix stitched across his jumpsuit. The mirror threw his reflection back at him. Perfect hair, tired eyes. Joe Esposito handed him a water bottle. House is full, Looks like another record night. Elvis smiled faintly. Yeah, another night. He stepped into the light. The brass hit first, bright, explosive. C.C. Ryder shook the walls. Elvis raised a hand, and the crowd detonated. Flashbulbs burst like tiny fireworks. For the first hour he was the Elvis they expected, spinning, grinning, commanding every beat. But close-up fans noticed something different. His smile looked like work. Each song felt polished yet restless, as if he was singing through a secret only he knew. By the time he launched into Burning Love, sweat glistened on his forehead, and the lights burned so hot they blurred the edges of the stage. The Hilton showroom was alive. Waiters balancing cocktails, fans screaming his name, flash bulbs popping. Still, behind his eyes, something was missing. He walked to the piano between songs, resting a hand on the keys. The crowd didn't notice the pause. They thought it was part of the act. But Joe, watching from the curtain, saw his friend staring out into nothing. What does a man do when the song that made him famous is the one that hurts the most? The band kicked into Suspicious Minds. It was his signature, fire, swagger, a love song dressed as a plea. But tonight he sang it slow, almost like a warning. The crowd didn't care. They were singing along, thousands of voices blending into a single heartbeat. Halfway through the verse, he looked past the spotlights toward the VIP section beneath the balcony. Something shifted in his face. A muscle trembled in his jaw. He kept singing, but his eyes were locked on one seat. The audience could feel the change even if they didn't understand it. The king's confidence wavered for a second, just long enough to make every fan lean forward. A woman in the front row later said it felt like watching lightning hesitate before it strikes. From the back, Colonel Tom Parker crossed his arms. He could smell trouble. He'd seen that look before, the one Elvis got when he was thinking about something he should keep buried. Elvis forced a smile, took a breath, and spun the microphone cord through his fingers. The band followed his lead, but the energy felt different now. Slower, heavier. Every line came out as if it meant too much. He whispered between lyrics, barely audible over the music. Lord, give me the strength. To most, it sounded like a stage aside. But Joe Esposito knew better. He'd heard that same prayer backstage before Graceland nights when Elvis talked about Priscilla. From the balcony, a flash bulb popped. For a split second, he saw her silhouette, dark hair, pearls, perfect posture. Priscilla. His hands froze mid-gesture. The crowd roared his name, but he didn't hear it. All he heard was memory, the sound of her laughter from Graceland's hallway, the door closing the night she left. He blinked hard, forcing himself to finish the chorus. Caught in a trap, he sang, voice cracking slightly on the word. A few people thought he was being dramatic. He wasn't. By the end of the song, the audience was on its feet, cheering. But Elvis didn't bow. He just stood there, gazing into the lights where she had been. The band waited for the next cue. He gave none. Colonel Parker motioned angrily from the side, but Elvis ignored him. His hand rested on the piano again, fingers tapping silently as if searching for a lost melody. The room buzzed with uneasy anticipation. No one knew it yet, but the night was about to change forever. Have you ever watched a man try to sing while his heart was breaking? The last note of Suspicious Minds hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. Elvis gripped the microphone stand, staring into the dark beyond the footlights. 20,000 people waited for the next song, but he wasn't seeing them anymore. He was seeing her. A familiar outline. Dark hair, pearl earrings, the stillness he'd memorized years ago. Priscilla. For a heartbeat he thought he was imagining her. A trick of the lights, a ghost built from loneliness. Then she shifted in her chair. The sequins on her dress caught the beam from the spotlight and flashed gold. It was real. His breath hitched. He turned away, pretending to adjust the mic. The audience thought it was showmanship. It wasn't. The band launched into the next number, It's Now or Never, but the rhythm faltered. The horn section was half a beat off. The drummer's timing slipped. They could feel something had changed in their leader. Joe Esposito whispered to a stagehand, "She's here."
Colonel Parker frowned.
Who? Priscilla. The colonel's face drained of color. Oh, Noah, not tonight. On stage, Elvis forced himself to keep moving. Every lyric sounded heavier now. Kiss me, my darling. Be mine tonight. He couldn't look at her, yet every word found her anyway. Priscilla sat perfectly still. People around her clapped and swayed, unaware that the song had become a conversation only two people could hear. Elvis's throat tightened. Be mine tonight, he sang again, softer. The crowd cheered the romantic echo. They didn't notice the tremor in his voice. He wiped sweat from his brow, forcing a grin. I wasn't expecting you tonight, he said into the microphone. Laughter rippled through the room. Vegas thought it was one of his famous ad-libs. But Joe, watching from the wings, knew the truth. From her seat, Priscilla smiled politely, the kind of smile that hides 1,000 memories. Elvis laughed too, but it came out wrong, short, nervous, almost shy. The band exchanged glances. They'd played with him for years, but none had ever seen him unsettled by anyone. The next song cue blinked on the teleprompter. Love Me Tender. He hesitated. That was their song. The one he'd sung to her backstage in 1959 before she moved into Graceland. The one that used to make her cry softly into his shoulder. He looked down at the set list. Then he looked up at her. She gave a tiny nod. The orchestra began the intro, slow strings, brushed cymbals, the gentle hum of the crowd falling silent. Elvis stepped closer to the edge of the stage. The lights dimmed to a warm amber. Wise men say, he began, then stopped himself. Wrong song. His mind was tangled. He laughed again, embarrassed. Guess I'm a little distracted tonight. The audience chuckled, thinking he was teasing them. He wasn't teasing anyone. From the corner of the VIP section, Priscilla tilted her head, eyes soft but unreadable. Elvis caught her gaze and froze. It felt like 1968 all over again. Two kids in love before the noise, before the crown. He forced himself to sing. The first lines came out shaky but tender. The room listened in complete silence. It wasn't performance anymore. It was confession wrapped in melody. When he finished, there was no cheer, just quiet admiration, the kind of silence that hums. Then applause thundered through the hall, echoing off the walls like a wave crashing back onto him. Elvis stepped away from the mic, staring at Priscilla. For a second, the crowd vanished. He mouthed two words that only she could read. I'm sorry. She blinked hard, trying not to cry. A single tear slipped down her cheek, catching the light. Joe Esposito whispered from the wings. Oh man, he's gone off script. Colonel Parker grunted. He better find it again before he ruins the show. But Elvis didn't hear them. He was lost somewhere between the past and the music. He walked to the piano, fingers grazing the keys without pressing them. The microphone picked up the sound of his breathing. You know, he said softly, sometimes a song isn't just a song. The audience leaned forward. Cameras flashed. Waiters stopped mid-pour. Even the casino sounds outside seemed to fade. He looked at her one last time and whispered, Stay a while, Scylla. She nodded. And the king, for the first time that night, sat down at the piano instead of walking away. The crowd erupted, thinking it was part of the act. It wasn't. He had something to say, something the world wasn't supposed to hear. Can a man sing to millions and still only see one face? For a few long seconds, nothing moved. Elvis sat at the piano, one hand resting on the keys, the other gripping the microphone like a lifeline. The crowd waited for the next familiar hit, but instead they got silence, thick electric silence. The only sound was the low hum of the amplifiers. Somewhere in the back, a glass clinked. A nervous laugh flickered through the audience, then died instantly. Elvis looked up, eyes searching the shadows until they found her again. Priscilla hadn't moved. She sat perfectly still in the golden VIP light, her hands folded, eyes glistening. He cleared his throat, his voice low. "Folks, there's something I need to do before we keep going." The orchestra froze. Joe Esposito leaned out from the curtain. Colonel Parker shook his head violently, mouthing, "No." Elvis ignored him. He tapped one note on the piano, just a soft A, hanging lonely in the air. Then another, slower. "There's a song I've never sung in public," he said. "Not because I couldn't, but because I wasn't ready." The audience murmured. Some thought it was a setup for a joke. Others sensed something heavier coming. He looked down at his trembling hands. "I wrote it a long time ago, back when love was still easy." A woman near the front gasped quietly, recognizing the name he had whispered moments earlier. "Scylla." Elvis took a breath, his chest rising like a man about to dive underwater. "If it's all right with y'all," he said, "I'm gonna play it tonight." The spotlight dimmed to a single beam, washing his face in white and leaving the rest of the stage in shadow. Even the casino outside seemed to stop spinning. Joe Esposito whispered to the bandleader, "Do you know this tune?" The bandleader shook his head. "Never heard it." Elvis placed both hands on the keys. The first chord rolled out deep and sad. It wasn't rock and roll. It wasn't gospel. It was something in between, private, unfinished, honest. He began to sing under his breath, testing the melody. The microphone caught every crack. His voice was fragile but still beautiful, like an old record playing in the dark. From her seat, Priscilla covered her mouth. She recognized the tune instantly. He had written it years earlier, during one of their quiet nights in Memphis, and promised he'd never sing it for anyone else. The crowd leaned in, drawn by something they couldn't name. They were witnessing the king of rock and roll without the crown. Colonel Parker hissed at a sound engineer, "Cut the feed. This isn't part of the show." But the engineer hesitated. "Sir, the audience would riot." On stage, Elvis smiled faintly, almost to himself. "Some songs don't belong on records," he said. "They belong right here." He pressed a hand against his chest. A hush blanketed the hall. Waiters froze mid-stride. Even the slot machines beyond the doors seemed muted. Then came a line that made the entire room exhale at once. "You were my reason to sing when the stage lights were low." His voice cracked on reason. The pianist beside the stage quietly stepped away, realizing the moment didn't need accompaniment. Priscilla's tears shimmered under the lights. She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. Elvis kept going, each lyric more personal than the last. "I gave you a kingdom built on applause, but forgot how to come home." Every note was confession. Every pause was regret. Fans began to cry without knowing why. They didn't recognize the tune, but they understood the feeling. It was love losing its armor. Joe Esposito whispered, "He's bleeding out there." The colonel snapped, "He's killing the show."
Joe replied, "No."
"He's saving himself." Halfway through, Elvis faltered. His hands slipped off the keys. The audience gasped. He looked down, whispering, "Sorry, folks. Guess the truth gets heavy after a while." Then he did something no one expected. He stood. The microphone cable dragged behind him as he walked to the edge of the stage. The crowd rose instinctively, sensing history. He looked straight at Priscilla. "Scylla," he said softly, voice trembling through the speakers. "This one's for you." The words hit like thunder. People covered their mouths. Cameras flashed. Priscilla pressed her hands to her heart. She mouthed, "I know." For 3 seconds, the entire Las Vegas Hilton held its breath. Elvis turned back to the piano. "Let's finish this," he said, almost in a whisper. He played the final verse slowly, eyes closed. "If I leave this world tonight, let them say I sang it right." When the last chord faded, no one clapped. They couldn't. The silence was too full. A single tear slid down his cheek and caught the light. He looked at the crowd, then back to her, and smiled the saddest smile anyone ever saw. Have you ever witnessed a man confess his whole heart to someone who'd already walked away? And just like that, Elvis Presley, America's brightest star, sat in the dark, surrounded by 20,000 people and utterly alone. The spotlight dimmed until only one beam remained, painting Elvis in silver light. Every eye in the Las Vegas Hilton fixed on him. He sat motionless at the piano, hands trembling above the keys, breathing like a man about to jump from a cliff. Then he began. The first notes were slow, hesitant. His voice, low and cracked, slid through the room like smoke curling through a church. "You were my reason to sing when the stage lights were low." A ripple passed through the crowd. It wasn't one of his hits. Nobody recognized it, but everyone felt it. The sound engineer whispered to Joe Esposito, "You hear that? He's writing his own eulogy up there." Joe nodded. "I know." On stage, Elvis's fingers moved gently, like he was afraid of breaking the keys. He wasn't performing anymore. He was remembering. Each word carried years of love, loss, and silence. "You gave me a home in the noise and the fire, but I lost your voice when the cheering got louder." Somewhere near the back, a woman sobbed. Another joined her. Then the entire hall went utterly still again, afraid to miss a syllable. Halfway through the second verse, he looked directly at the VIP section. The light caught Priscilla's face. Tear streaks glittered like diamonds. Their eyes locked. He gave a small, sad nod, as if asking permission to keep going. She nodded back. He reached the bridge, voice shaking but unbroken. "If I never find the words to say goodbye, let this be the one you remember me by." He stopped playing for a heartbeat. The audience leaned forward. His next whisper cut through the silence like thunder. "This one's for you, Scylla." Gasps erupted across the showroom. Cameras flashed. Waiters froze mid-step. People turned to stare at Priscilla, who pressed her hand to her mouth. Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. For that one moment, 20,000 people felt like intruders witnessing something private. Elvis closed his eyes and sang the final chorus a cappella. No band, no spotlight movement, just voice and air. "When the curtain falls and the crowd is gone, know you were my first and last song." His voice cracked on the word last. A few fans clapped instinctively, but the sound died as quickly as it started. The hall felt sacred now. The colonel stood frozen backstage, his cigar burning forgotten in his hand. "He's destroying his career," he whispered. Joe Esposito replied, "Maybe he's saving his soul." Elvis finished the final note and just sat there. The microphone caught the sound of his shaky breathing. The piano pedal creaked beneath his foot. Then slowly he lifted his head. "Thank you," he said, not to the crowd but to her. Priscilla mouthed something back. Some say it was "I forgive you." Others swore it was simply "I remember." Whatever it was, it hit him harder than any applause. He smiled, soft, exhausted, real, and placed his palm flat on the piano lid. "Guess that's one for the angels," he murmured. No one moved. Not the fans, not the band, not even the press photographers. They all knew they'd witnessed something that would never happen again. Then the ovation started, quiet at first, one pair of hands, then hundreds, then thousands. It rose like a wave crashing over him. The cheers became sobs. The sobs became prayer. He stood slowly, wiping his face with a handkerchief. His eyes shone under the white light. "Thank you, Las Vegas," he said softly. "You just heard a piece of my heart." He turned toward the band. "Take 5, boys." As the curtains closed, the crowd stayed standing, clapping, crying, shouting his name long after he disappeared behind the velvet drapes. Backstage, the colonel tried to speak, but Elvis cut him off with a look. "Don't say a word, Tom. That wasn't for them. That was for her." He walked down the hallway toward his dressing room, the applause still rumbling through the walls like thunder from another world. Outside, people poured into the casino lobby, dazed, whispering to strangers about what they'd just seen. No one could quite describe it. They just kept saying, "He sang something we weren't meant to hear." And somewhere in the middle of that chaos, Priscilla stepped out quietly, holding a tissue to her lips. A reporter called her name, but she didn't answer. She just said softly, "That was ours." Can love survive when the whole world is watching it fall apart? For a moment after the final chord, no one breathed. The entire Las Vegas Hilton seemed suspended in the same heartbeat. The king of rock and roll sat in darkness, head bowed, hands still on the piano. Then a sound began. One pair of hands clapping from the balcony. Another joined. Then another. Within seconds, the applause swelled into a storm. 20,000 people rose to their feet, shouting his name until it shook the ceiling. Elvis didn't stand right away. He looked down at the keys, tears still glittering under the stage light. When he finally rose, it wasn't the grand, dramatic motion of the performer everyone expected. It was slow, like a man learning to stand again after being broken. He turned toward the crowd and smiled through trembling lips. "Thank you," he whispered. It was almost lost beneath the roar, yet somehow everyone heard it. In the VIP section, Priscilla was still standing, her hands clasped to her chest. He found her face instantly, even through the haze of flashbulbs. For a long second, the two simply looked at each other. Then he mouthed the words, "Thank you." She nodded once. Nothing more needed to be said. Joe Esposito watched from the wings, blinking back his own tears. "That's not the king right now," he murmured to a stagehand. "That's just Elvis Presley from Tupelo saying goodbye." When the applause finally began to fade, Elvis wiped his eyes with the same handkerchief he'd used on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said softly, "sometimes you don't plan a moment, it just finds you." The crowd cheered again. He laughed, genuine, unguarded. "You gave me a gift tonight. I'll never forget it." He set the microphone back in its stand and turned toward the curtain, but before stepping through, he glanced at Priscilla one last time and raised his hand in a quiet wave. Backstage, the noise from the showroom was still thundering. Colonel Parker stormed toward him, face red. "What in God's name was that?" Elvis handed him the handkerchief. "That," he said calmly, "was the truth." He walked past the colonel before another word could form. Joe followed close behind. "What was that song, E?" Elvis smiled faintly. "Something I should have sung a long time ago." Joe waited for more, but Elvis didn't elaborate. He just opened the door to his dressing room and let the applause pour in behind him like a tide. Inside, he sat at the mirror, staring at his reflection. The makeup around his eyes was smudged, his collar damp, but there was peace in his face, something he hadn't seen there in years. He pulled a reel-to-reel tape from the table and slid it toward Joe. "Lock this away," he said. "No one gets it till I say." Joe looked down at the label. Scylla's song. "You sure about that?" Elvis nodded. "Yeah, that one wasn't meant for sale. It was meant to be heard once." Outside, the ovation hadn't stopped. It went on for 15 straight minutes, echoing through the corridors, rising up the elevators, spilling into the casino below. Guests left roulette tables to listen. Dealers paused their games. The sound of 20,000 strangers applauding one man became the pulse of the whole city. Reporters in the lobby scribbled headlines on napkins. "Elvis stops the show with mystery song." Photographers rushed toward the showroom doors, but the guards kept them back. The man inside had already left the stage, and something about that made the story even bigger. Back in his room, Elvis leaned against the wall, eyes closed. "You hear that?" he said quietly. Joe nodded. "They're not stopping." Elvis smiled faintly. "Leching. They're clapping for something I finally got right." He opened the top drawer of his vanity, pulled out a silver ring, and turned it in his fingers. Maybe tonight I finally gave her what I owed. Outside, the ovation thundered on. Have you ever heard applause that sounded less like cheering and more like forgiveness? When the curtains closed that night, Las Vegas felt different. Outside the Hilton, the desert air carried a strange stillness. Even the neon seemed quieter, as if the city knew it had witnessed something it couldn't explain. Inside, technicians rewound empty reels, searching for the moment they'd just lived. But one recording was missing. The sound engineer swore he'd captured it. The colonel swore he'd ordered it erased. Somewhere between them, the tape vanished. 2 weeks later, a single unlabeled reel appeared in Elvis's dressing room safe. Written in his neat blue ink were 3 words. Scylla's song, Keep. He never mentioned it again. Over the next months, the king who had always performed at full throttle seemed gentler, slower. His shows grew smaller, more intimate. He'd pause between songs and talk to the crowd about second chances, about the kind of love that never really leaves you. During one of his last performances, he ended the night by saying, "If you've ever lost someone, don't forget. Love doesn't stop when the music does." People thought it was stage philosophy. Joe Esposito knew better. When Elvis passed less than a year later, grief rippled across the world. But in Graceland, among the gold records and trophies, something quiet was found. In the top drawer of his piano bench, wrapped in silk, lay the missing tape. The label read simply, Scylla's song, Vegas 76. Joe played it once, alone. The audio was fragile. Tape hiss, faint piano, the hush of 20,000 people breathing as one. At the end, Elvis's voice cracked, whispering, "Thank you, Scylla." Joe wept. Then he locked it away. Years later, after Lisa Marie turned 21, Priscilla received a small package in the mail. No note, no return address. Inside was that same reel, now aged and delicate, along with a single sentence written in Elvis's handwriting. "This was my apology." When journalists asked her about it, she didn't describe the melody. She only said, "It was the first time I heard him say goodbye properly." Today, nearly 50 years later, the Las Vegas Hilton, now the Westgate, still carries a secret tribute. Near the main showroom doors, beneath the soft glow of the lobby lights, a bronze plaque rests behind glass. December 2nd, 1976, the night Elvis Presley stopped the show for love. Every August, fans leave roses and folded notes beneath it. Some whisper that they can almost hear faint music when they stand there, like a piano playing from somewhere behind the walls. A few sound technicians claim that, late at night, the original house speakers still hum for a split second at 12:02 a.m., the exact minute he began that song. No one has ever found another recording. Just that one reel, kept in a temperature-controlled case at Graceland's archives. When the curators play it for anniversaries, the tape still wobbles and cracks, but the emotion survives. You can hear him smile mid-verse. You can hear the crowd's quiet disbelief. You can even hear, faintly, the sound of a woman crying in the background. Some say it's Priscilla. Others say it's every person who ever lost a love they never stopped singing about. Love stories fade. Legends echo. But some moments outlive both. Because that night in Vegas, Elvis didn't perform for fame or money or headlines. He sang because he needed forgiveness, and he found it in the same place he'd lost it, under the lights in front of her. Would you have sung your truth if it meant breaking your own heart? He did, and somewhere, in the soft hiss of that old tape, he's still singing it. Some stories don't end when the curtain falls. They echo, in songs, in memories, in the silence between two people who once loved each other. If the story moved you, share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Because the greatest love songs aren't written for the charts. They're written for the hearts we never forget.